I'm Jonathan Gerwitz, Vice President of KGB Texas Communications, and welcome to The Point. Today, we're visiting with Eric Cooper, the President and CEO of the San Antonio Food Bank. Eric, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan. Great to be with you.
Thanks. Let's get right to the point, and I have to start with the photo. William Luther's photo of the food distribution that took place on April 9th. It appeared in the Express News on April 10th, and then in papers across the state, across the country, and around the world. And I think it really opened people's eyes, not only in our own community, but elsewhere, about the impact of the pandemic. Was there anything that could have prepared you for that day?
Boy, Jonathan, you know from your longtime service at United Way, our community has some struggle. Whether it's, basic needs like food and shelter, or the need for opportunity, meaningful employment, childcare, affordable housing. So many of our residents are living on the edge. And I think the COVID-19 crisis just pushed so many of them in our Riverwalk economy over that edge. A lot of them had never had to ask for help before. They were doing okay, living above the edge, but I tell you, we were blown away. We typically pre-COVID would feed between 58 and 60,000 people a week, and that number jumped to 120,000 people a week, and really has stayed consistent since mid-March. We had launched some preparedness strategies, knowing potentially that the United States could be impacted by the coronavirus, and we had some prevention and preparedness work that we were doing with our low-income seniors. We have almost 14,000 senior households that get monthly food boxes from the food bank, and so we added to those food boxes some hygiene items and tried to advance them a little bit more food, thinking at that moment in time, this would have been the end of February, that we might have difficulty in getting to them should they not be able to come out to the distribution sites where they typically pick up their food. That was now looking back, that was our paradigm hadn't changed. We were taking a pretty big risk in advancing food on our food supply, that we would struggle. But boy, as we all saw then, just into spring break, that second week in March, our world unraveled. And so we were so glad that we had put that food out, but we didn't fully anticipate the changes in the supply chain, how we actually get food. And so much of this work is just trying to respond and keep the faith. I think looking at it, you don't know how you're going to do it, but now looking back, you see where our city really stepped up, and we were able to fulfill our mission and respond to this crisis.
I've read about and I've heard you talk about your life experiences and how that led you to a career in community service. Talk about your journey in that experience, those experiences with hunger and homelessness, and how those experiences helped you to better understand the complex issues around hunger.
Yeah, well, thank you for remembering that, Jonathan, and that opportunity for me to share maybe some of my lived and personal experience around just life happening. I think for so many households and people, we all have our seasons of struggle. And, my parents struggled in their marriage, which led to divorce, which led to separation. And then ultimately me finding my father on the streets of Portland, homeless. And I, couldn't now see someone as a stranger. I saw him as a brother. I saw him as a sister, a mom, or for me, I saw him as my dad, and entered this work of just trying to nourish, to put food on the table for people that struggle.
as we enter the holiday season, we're seeing an uptick in COVID-19 here and across the state, across the nation. I know a lot of us are worried that the need in our community for food is greater than ever. What's your assessment of the state of food insecurity at this time?
Well, I tend to stress daily about our inventory on hand, right? When the pandemic hit us, we saw just a reduction in support that we were getting from the supply chain, and specifically food that we'd get from restaurants, hotels, and caterers. They had all closed, right? There wasn't a lot of food service happening, and so we didn't get that food. The food that we typically rescue from the retail sector, grocery stores, we all saw the empty shelves, and our retailers were actually selling at such an efficiency. There wasn't any margin for us to pick up. And so we saw about a 35% decrease in the volume of food that our trucks would typically pick up pre-COVID. At the same time, the demand doubled. And so, I could stand out in the middle of our warehouse and see all four walls, which, isn't a place that I want to be. I want to see racks full of food. And, typically the food bank has about, 2 weeks worth of food. That's, to help people understand, it doesn't sound like a lot of food, but we are a food distribution company. We're not a warehouse, right? We want to keep our inventory, moving to those in need. And it's, the solution to hunger is the right food, right amount, right time, trying to align all of those variables. But I feel like we're well positioned. I know the strength of this community to respond. Nonprofits fill the gaps, right? But these issues are much bigger than your San Antonio food bank, right? We're scrappy, we're nimble, we can respond quickly, but the significant duration of this pandemic needs significant investments that really bring the public-private partnerships to the table, and everybody doing what they can if we're going to weather those big spikes and big issues that could be in our future.
You talked a little bit about volunteering. I'm a big believer in the physical, emotional, spiritual benefits of volunteerism. How can people volunteer and help the food bank?
Well, I'm going to build on that, Jonathan, because I do too. And statistically, these are facts, right? Volunteers live longer than those that don't volunteer. But there's a little antidote, or a little asterisk, I guess, that you gotta think about. Volunteerism has to be altruistic. You can't get anything back, right? So I'd probably just killed it, right? When I tell people volunteers live longer, if you go volunteer because you think you're going to live longer, then actually you won't live longer.
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to work. It has to be pure. It has to be altruistic. But wherever we're feeling depressed or overwhelmed with our own struggles, the best way to lighten our load is just to take the struggles of someone else on, and you come away recalibrated and with a different vision and perspective that I think actually helps us weather our own trials better. Because of the pandemic and really corporate policies around liability and gathering people, corporate volunteerism just stopped. And we understand why it stopped. Many of those corporations said, "Hey, Eric, we're going to change from sending our people to sending money." And really, it was the biggest blessing we could have gotten, because it really brought a lot more financial support that then allowed us to purchase the food needed. But we still needed volunteers. And those volunteers, though, just came in different ways. I mean, we were so pleasantly surprised that we weathered that shortage of labor with just a 10% loss of volunteers that we typically see.
That's great.
I think it's bringing healing to not only those that receive the benefit, but that those that are able to give the benefit likewise.
And so if people want to volunteer, they can go to the food bank website and find out what those opportunities are and how to register, right?
Yeah, just safoodbank.org. You'll hit the volunteer give time button, and it's a super quick individual registration. You pick a time slot that works for you. You can register as an individual or you could register as a group, but the need for volunteers is great. I mean, I think we'd love to close that 10% gap and get 100% occupancy in those shifts so that we can continue to make sure all the needs are met throughout our community.
Well, thank you, Eric, and God bless you for all the wonderful work that you do in our community in addressing this critical need for the people of San Antonio. And thank you for joining us on The Point.
Thanks, Jonathan.